it takes it out of this invisible space, which is in the mind, and it puts it out in front of us that we can actually see it, right? So for me, the original idea of Shookman, or at least how it came about, was with, well, one specific friend in particular. When we used to go out into clubs and stuff, and we wanted to talk to women, we recognized that often there's a little voice in our heads that would say, "Oh, all the reasons why it could go wrong. You're right. She's not
A little
interested, or
voice, eh?
yeah, yeah." And the little voice would say, "Oh, you go over and you'll get embarrassed because she'll reject you, or maybe her boyfriend will come over, or some who's not in the picture right now. You can't see him, but he's going to come. Maybe she'll throw a drink in your face, or she'll think uh, your opening line or whatever you start the conversation with is silly." And so that's where it kind of started, and in a good way, actually, because when me and my friend, we would share that. So the good of it is that we would share it, and I suppose what I recognized back then is that it's something that we shared, and it also made it easy. It kind of took the pressure off. It took the pressure off that highly pressurized situation of going over and talking to a stranger, and it made it funny because we were both experiencing this thing that was going on inside our heads. So that's when that was like, that was a while ago now. That was like, we're talking like pre. Well, that was definitely before 2016, all that stuff. Like, and
Right,
so
yeah.
yeah, it's quite a while ago.
It's
But
really nice to have a friend you could be that honest with, though, because I know a lot in my experience, you know, there's a bit of a culture of you express that stuff, you either laughed at, picked on, or pressured into it, or don't worry, or just, like there's having somebody
yeah,
you can actually share that with and talk about it. I think that's fantastic.
yeah, yeah, you're right. And I think the reason I didn't think about that really, because that's definitely something that I found, and I also make available to other people, is it's like the secure environment, or the space to just be and to share and to talk about what's really going on. But yeah, it was very fortunate that I had a friend, and I think that's also because he and I and another I got quite a few friends like that. We have all done personal development in our own way. Like we've all, and when I say personal development, I mean we've all spent time engaged in courses where we've gone to learn more about ourselves, because we believe the more we understand about ourselves, the more opportunity we have in life, right? So yeah, well, without realizing it, that created a foundation for honest communication and an appreciation for just speaking openly about how we're really thinking and feeling. And then that that opened the door to us actually having that kind of interaction where, yeah, you're right, like normally who's gonna who's gonna share with their friends like, oh yeah, I'm feeling fearful, or because normally the idea is your bravado, right? Like you gotta look like you know what you're doing, you gotta look like you got it all together, the James Bond effect. So yeah, no, you're right, it's a good point.
Yeah. Um, so we're talking about when that's when you first became aware of that inner voice. I guess there's concept of Shookman himself. Like when did that develop and for what reason? Like that's because I love this idea that you've taken it and given it a name, right?
Yeah,
And that's
yeah, and that's why I said like pre 2016, because 2016 was the first time I had the intuition to sit down. It was like just like an inspiration to go, well, what would he look like? And at the time, I didn't consider myself an artist, and I'd actually forgotten that I used to love to doodle and draw when I was younger. But I sat down and I just thought, okay, just blank mind, without any idea of what he could look like. Let's just go for it and just see. And I drew it literally with a pen on paper,
yeah,
and yeah, and so I drew that, and I drew this character first time ever, and I drew him as a shadow, something that, because we learn a lot in personal development that the idea that we have our the parts of us that we show to the world, but then we have the parts that we was quote unquote shadow, which is kind of like behind the bits that we show to the world, right? So I drew him like a shadow of this. I actually had the whole scene. I think it's in the book actually. Yeah. There's a picture of it in the book where there's a young kid on the
I'm
floor.
just looking at your website now, which
Yeah,
I can share for the audience, but we can just it's basically it's a shadow monster kind of
Yeah,
spiky hair, sharp fingers,
that's
sort
right.
of. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and
and in the original drawing, it was like he was the shadow of this young guy, and it was like that because it's like that, just like you said there, like who shares that part of themselves, that fearful little voice that says you can and can't, or no, can but you can't do things. But that's when I first drew him, and at the time, I didn't really recognize the value of that. I just kind of went, "Oh, that's cool," and I drew it, and very much like a comic book character, but yeah, where it's come from there is quite profound. Yeah.
yeah. So that's so the Shookman. See, I know you talk a lot about fear, and I know we've been through similar trainings, and we've got this concept of everybody uses the word ego, but when we use it, it's not. A lot of people think of ego as being very up yourself, think you're great, but when we talk about ego, it's more um, your conscious sense of identity and that part of you that makes decisions on how things are, how things work, that sort of stuff. So, Shookman, to you, is very much a reflection of that concept of an ego. It's the part of, that's funny because I'm saying it's the part of you, but part of what you teach is that it's not you, right? As well. There's that, but it's an interesting point. So that's the Shookman really is a representation of the ego, or is there something deeper to that
I think
for
yeah,
you?
because I think inherently, what it originally I would have said yes, but then I think there's a slight nuance here because I think our egos are also what I would say our egos are neither good nor bad, right? They're just part of it. It's like the vehicle for which we can
Mm-hmm.
be in the world, and it gives us personality, and it's based on all these decisions and which become stories that we live by. Where Shookman comes in is predominantly the more fearful elements of that, right? It's where,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's where, yeah, and that's where we can get stuck rather than just seeing things as like, oh, that happened and therefore that's shaped my character. Like things that have led to you being a podcast producer, right? Because at some point you decided that, oh, communication is something that I enjoy, right? And that's not wrong. That's not bad. That's good, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then Shookman is more the elements of it where it kind of goes over. It becomes what's the word I'm looking for? It's like it. The one I'm thinking of is a bit like a cancer. Because a cancer overactive, like a cancer is like an overactive cell. Shookman's like the overactive part of our personality that becomes, if we're not aware of it, it becomes it can impact the rest of our lives in a very detrimental way because it's overly fearful about things, and that's something that I experienced was like being overly fearful, overly anxious, and so yeah, so it is a part of the ego, but a more overactive, fearful element of the ego.
Yeah. So it's funny how things change because you talk about that, and I think back to my early 20s, even, right? Still a young adult. I was so scared that I was the kind of person too timid to go up to a counter and ask for a napkin, right? You're out at the
Sure,
restaurant
yeah,
and you didn't get any napkins, and someone goes, "Go get some napkins," and it's just ask that person over there, and you suddenly you're like, and that's like I was a full grown adult, right? And it's funny
yeah.
with a lot of training and a lot of personal development work over years. Now I'm on a podcast putting like I'm making content on videos and just going, I know how scary that is, and I'm so proud of other people. I know other people who do it too, and I can see their awkward fear through that sometimes too. But I don't know if I'd pick it up if I wasn't experiencing it myself. But it's interesting, very much relate to that. That back then, no idea how to overcome it. Right? Absolutely not. It's taken time, and even now it's almost an alien concept. I can remember it, but I don't relate to it as much anymore because it's just something I've come to. Fear comes up sometimes. Even which I might not call fear. I know sometimes because you've talked a bit about just how the voice is really loud and it's very much like a toddler. It's that child self that can come in. And I know I've suffered a lot of anxiety, and sometimes when the anxiety is going off, you just got this voice going, what about, and it can ruminate, just go over the same thing over and over and over again until I was walking down the street one day, just had to verbally open my mouth and say, would you shut up, go and sit in the damn corner, I've heard you, I get it, I'm aware of it, I just need you to go. And then actually got a reprieve and it's funny these days, even my anxiety, sometimes I can feel it creeping on and it's like, hello, Like but starting to
Yeah.
understand that used to be me and my anxiety were one in the same thing. And now it's like an old friend. It's like, hello. It's like, are you coming up? You
Yeah.
go and sit, like, it's almost like you're allowed to be here, but go
Yeah.
over there. Right.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
you're not driving. I'm driving. It's an interesting, but it is that very persistent nagging, it's
Yeah.
really, was really interesting experience to get that I consciously know that what you're talking about is not a thing, right? It's this voice in my head that's going, what about this situation? What about that? And you go, it's not real, right? But it still keeps running anyway. And it's a really interesting
Yeah, like there's a
way.
few things you've said there which I think are really interesting. Like number one is being able to see it as a separate thing, as opposed to, like you said, it used to be one, and now it's like this piece of you that's from the past. And that's a huge part of what Shookman was about when I drew it. And like I said, I didn't originally acknowledge the value of it, but then as time went on and the more I played with the concept, the more I explored, even for myself, what it meant, I realized and recognized that what I'd created was something that allowed us to look at it separately and go, oh, that's not all of me. It's a part of me, but it's not all of me. And then the other thing is like, well, what's its function, right? Because we often, when we collapse it into one, we say, oh, that's me, and that's all good. Like, and it's almost like a reason to beat ourselves up, because it's like, oh, look at so and so, right? And I'm sure, like, the funny thing now is the shoes on the other foot. Some people are going to be looking at you and be like, look at Bevan creating content, just putting it out there, like, how brave, and he's living his life, right?
Yeah, the
And
voice
then
in my head going, yeah, right, right, yeah, right.
but you see what I mean, right? So, but
What's
the
this idiot?
truth.
Right? That's,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
the truth. But then other people, they're looking up at you and thinking, "Oh, I wish I could do just a fraction of that." Right? How would my life look like if I? And then you, in the past, were probably doing that with other people, right? And you've traveled the journey. So then it's two things. One, it's separate it from yourself. Two, it's like recognizing that we all have it. Like we all have this piece. And then this other thing as well, which is interesting, is, and I think when we were discussing this, like doing the setup for this podcast, and I was sharing with you how I recently said I was giving a talk, and I recently shared how, like, well, if these thoughts and feelings, like I said, they're not all of you, if they're not you, essentially, then who are they? Right. And so who are these thoughts, and what's their function? And so, what I've come to appreciate over time is initially it's this like big scary monster. It's this thing that is keeping us stuck. And eventually realizing that actually, yeah, it's that younger version of ourselves that when we were a kid got scared about something or felt that they couldn't have a voice. That if they went up and asked for napkins, maybe they would be rejected, or maybe they would be told off, whatever it is, right? But so what is that? That's safety. That's keeping us safe, right? But
Mm-hmm.
as an adult, it's like sometimes you need some napkins, all right? Or sometimes you need to,
Yeah,
you need to sell something. You need to ask for something, right? And that's a huge part of life. Like if you can't promote yourself, then you can have wonderful ideas, but you'll never get out there. So it has profound impact. And as you said, it's like it's not just for young people; it's adults can be struggling with this sort of stuff.
yeah. I feel like a lot of the Shookman is written for younger people who are being introduced to these concepts,
Yeah.
right? Because to be honest with you, I look at some of the kids shows and they like kids cartoons and stuff. They teach things about how to recognize what fear feels like, how to be what happy, what
Mm,
jealousy's like, and that's about as far as they go. And they often actually teach push on the honoring those feelings that they never teach that it is separate to you and you can disconnect and judge
mm,
them from an external sort of thing. But a lot of what you teach, I think, is nice and aimed at the introductory thing, like the false evidence appearing real you teach. So you're just speaking to that then.
yeah.
I've read an example you use in your book about crossing the road, right? Like you need to cross the road, you press the button, you cross the road, and you don't get, you're not majorly feared, even though you really are in danger. You could get hit by a car, right? But you're
Mm,
not terrified and stuck in your tracks. But then you can go do something like talk to a girl or go and ask
mm.
for napkins, and suddenly you're completely debilitated by fear. And there's a purpose to this, right? And that's because I guess from a scientific perspective, they go pretty much everything about us has some evolutionary value to it
Mm.
somewhere, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that's what you're touching on. There's a purpose to this this part of ourselves, but it grew up in a time when we were running away from, sure people have heard this concept before, but you're living in a tight little tribal unit, right? And if you get rejected, then you're on your own and you're going to get eaten by a lion, right? You're not going to survive by yourself. So we've got this inbuilt terrible fear of rejection, to a large extent, but all sorts of things come up, like putting myself out there. If I go out there and tell the truth and everyone's against me, then there's a lot of all this conformity and stuff comes along from that. So
yeah, and the reason I'm laughing is because as much as I experienced my own Shookman, it's funny to me that I've created this monster, I've drawn him out loads, and now I'm going around talking to people about it, right? And like, what's crazier than that? like what's in terms of yeah.
See, that's the thing. I've seen your journey too, right? So I met you in London in 2019. I imagine.
Yeah.
Trying to get I think it would have been about 2019. We were both at a natural success course for a week. And here I was in London. I used to be terrible scared of bloody spending money on traveling and stuff. And there I was in London. I met you there. Hey, and here we are all these years later. But even then, I saw you get up and speak in front of the group there for a bit. Interested in who you were. I think you were single back then. You were young. And I remember looking at you going, who's this guy with all this confidence, good-looking fellow? And even I'm sitting there going, like there was quite a few people in that room where I was just comparing myself to them going, who are they?
Sure.
But then I've seen you, the Shookman's come about and you've gone and shared that and then started putting yourself out there. And some of the social posts, I saw one from you maybe 2 years ago, but it always stuck with me. Early in the game with this, when you're starting to go and run seminars and classes and stuff, that you're out at a party and you're out on a boat and you had a meeting to get to, something like that. You're out on the boat and the party's happening and you needed to get back, but everybody's out on the boat and you're kind of stuck there, I think. And you had to deal with your emotional aspects of that. That's something. So I've sort of been watching that journey, and it's amazing to see you grow in that sense. And so it's an interesting thing because I put you up there, like I'm comparing myself. But even then, it's like you're facing some major fears, and even when I read that, you go, "That's so inspiring, that's so amazing." But then, I'm glad it was you. Like I wouldn't want to. Having to face that fear is a horrible thing to do. Like I'm kind of sitting here now, even though I do it myself, right? That's the funny thing. Even there's times when I've overcome fear, but it can be such a debilitating. No one really wants to face fear. It's so easy just to want to be comfortable and go, you know what, I'm just going to not deal with it. And then you start playing small, right? But you're comfortable.
It's interesting, though, as well. I think there's, a couple of things that you mentioned. And I think one of the biggest problems that we face these days as creatives, as people that want to do things, is comparison. Because we're always looking at, in fact, someone said to me recently, it's like a photograph, right? You're only seeing a snapshot of someone, but then we're assuming a whole world off for one snapshot, right? And we know how many photos and snapshots and video, whatever snapshots are done on Instagram, and someone said to me recently, you're only ever seeing what people want you to see, and we're only ever showing people what we want them to see, like most of the time, right? Like it's 99% of the time that's all that's going on, but then there's this whole there's this whole world behind that where the truth of it is, right? Like, so the anxiety, the doubt, the comparison, the feeling inferior. And I think the funny thing is that it's the power of it is like going back to what we were saying about the ego is not necessarily wrong. Like it's just personality, right? And when we can look at that and go, oh, right, yeah, the reason why, to use your example of like going out asking for napkins, the reason why I'm afraid of asking for napkins was because when I was X, Y, Z, when I was this age, I asked for something and I was rebuked. And at that age, I felt really embarrassed or I was told off and I just went, whoa, it's not good for me to ask for things. So whenever now there's an opportunity to ask for something, I always feel a little bit of apprehension. But when you start to recognize it, go, well, okay. And similar to how you said, you speak to the younger self sometimes you tell it to be quiet. But there's also another way as well, which is like they call it parenting, like self-parenting, and it's like being able to
Yeah.
go, oh, why are you afraid? Like what's happening? Oh, okay, you think that if you go up and talk to this person or ask them for something, they might shut you down. Okay, is that 100% true? Okay, it's not 100% true. They might be okay. Are there examples of where that's been? So, like, imagine talking to yourself as a child, or even another child, right, a 4-year-old, and just explaining to them that, well, as an adult, you can take care of yourself. It's not the same as when you were
Yeah.
young. You know what I mean, right? If you go and ask for napkins and someone completely loses their temper, you might go, "Are you all right?" Rather than as a
Yeah. Yeah.
like I've just asked for
Yeah.
napkins, but as a child, that's not how it is, right? Like there's a memory that came back to me recently, and I hadn't. It's not that I'd forgotten the memory; it's that I hadn't twigged the importance of it. And again, something simple as I was in a swimming pool. I was a lot younger, and probably with my older siblings and some older friends and stuff, family friends, and they'd swum into the deep end, right? And I felt like I want to
Mhm.
follow them, right? And there's no barrier. It's just like it's shallow and then it goes deeper. So I swam, and then I got to a point where it was now no longer I could put my feet down, right? So then I
Yeah.
go to put my feet down, and naturally I sink. And now what's going on is I'm in a pattern of like sinking, pushing off the bottom to get some air, and then sinking again, and then actually
See.
starting to get scared, right? And I'm literally coming up for air and going help, and then the bubbles help, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
the lifeguard puts a stick in, very nonchalant, just puts a stick in. I hold the stick, and they pull me out, and I vaguely remember them saying something like, why did you come into this section? If you can't swim, you shouldn't do that, so on and so forth. And what I realized I made that mean is I shouldn't go beyond I shouldn't put myself into a dangerous place, right? Into something that I don't know, into something that I'm unawares of. Okay, and that seems like pretty good advice, but then, or even a lesson to learn. But then it's difficult to then step out of that and go, okay, I'm going to take a risk, because any risk starts to feel like, well, what if that happens again? What if I put myself into a scenario that I put my life in danger? And it seems a bit dramatic, but as a child making that decision, you start
Yeah.
cutting off certain things, or not pushing the boat, not trying. Now, I could have said, "Oh God!" Instead, I could have said, as a child, I could have said, "Oh, okay, I couldn't swim. I'm going to practice swimming until I'm much stronger, and then where I don't have to put my feet down." Right? But that's not the decision I made. I made the decision like there's a boundary, and I better be damn careful not to go beyond it, because if I do,
Yeah.
I might put myself in danger.
See, I'm fascinated by that story because I like how you mentioned that, they pull you out with a stick and then someone said, well, why did you go into the deep end?
Yeah.
And it strikes me that that's almost a strong part of the memory is the rebuke. Like here you are
Yeah.
fighting for your life and literally on the verge of death, yet you've also psychologically remembered the rebuke,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's partly where the meaning comes from. Because I think personally myself, a lot of the times when things have happened, it's the rebuke can be the scariest part, right? It's not
Mm.
you survived, right? You came out,
Yeah.
like it's not
Yeah.
like we've ever died, like we're so scared of death, but it's not something we've ever experienced. But we have been rebuked, right? And it can
Mm.
be very, very scary. I know there's a lot of Sydney talking. I remember playing with electric trains when I was a kid, and I loved pulling things apart and putting that together. There's something wrong with it once, and we took it into the guy to fix it, and he's like, "Did you pull this apart?" I'm like, "Yeah," and you shouldn't ever pull that motor out because you wear it, the magnet's going to wear out, and it's like I barely ever touched like those trains
Mm.
ever again, right? Just that
Wow.
one
Yeah.
thing, we just go to the shop, and he probably wasn't even very like he was an adult grown man, and he probably wasn't in his mind even being rebuking. He was just giving some advice.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
as a kid, I've taken it as you did the wrong thing, you're an idiot. Like that's
Yeah.
and I think and those things can happen a few times. There's a few memories I've got. I mean, being in primary school when I know this one a lot. There was a bunch of I remember the teacher telling us all that the boys are making too much noise in the toilets, that they're not allowed to do it. There's a rule down if you go in the toilets, you're going to be put on detention, sort of thing. So I was walking past the toilets, and all these boys run in there and they start making all this noise. And I've run in there to tell them to stop making their noise because they're going to get in trouble. And the teacher followed me in and rounded me up with them and put me on detention as well. As part of, and it's one of those things that builds up this fear of Why would I do the right thing like that? And I can see multiple times where things like that have happened, where I've been falsely like rounded up, just gone, without trial or anything, right? Just off you go. We've decided and it's these things really stick with you, and it's funny. It's not nothing. I've been in life and death situations, but it's the personal things that seem to stick with you once you explore this stuff. Really interesting. So just going through, because we're talking about beliefs versus reality. We're kind of touching on this really a lot now, because that fear is such a main driver of so many. If we're not aware of it, right? If you're not aware of it, it can be making so many decisions. I find personally that there's something to be said for awareness without fixation, right? Because I personally don't like a lot of people pushing awareness all the time. They spend so much time on awareness, you're ever going to do anything about it, right? It's a bit chicken, the sky is falling. Once you find your fear, you don't go on for every time going, I'm scared. At some point, you've got to face that fear, right, and move on. But fear is a real main driver, and it can be very difficult to discern what your behavior is, right? We touched on there's an evolutionary aspect to where this fear comes from, but then there are those beliefs. We've been talking about this, like that's if I go to get the napkin, am I going to be rebuked? Now I've had enough practice over the years to just go and get a napkin. I don't even think about it now, right? The fact that I would say that sounds absolutely ridiculous, and I have trouble remembering that was me, but I was that timid. But there was this belief that there was something inherently scary about talking to people because they might say something, right? But then reality is entirely different. And so we also got, I think we touched on this because you were talking about the ego before. So we're touching on this fear, but then there is this aspect of, do you really know what it's almost I'm touching on. There's an element of hubris in it. I'm going to push it out there. If you're going around and you're so scared of doing these things, I'm almost going to be harsh. Who the hell do you think you are to know what's going? Like in the vast scheme of things, we're tiny little beings on this tiny little planet in the vast scheme of the universe, and you're so terrified that if you go do this one thing, that somehow all this drastic stuff, the universe is massive and complex and unfolding upon itself all over the place. There's this, I think there's an element of hubris to that. You're so sure that it's going to go wrong. So what am I getting at? I guess that's, I guess I'm pushing that idea that there's a vulnerability in admitting the fear. And not just from a victim. It's like that's my point. We're not just a victim to that fear. We're complicit in it too. Right? So,
there's a lot. There's actually a lot in that as well, because often we can play the victim, but actually we can also be the perpetrator in that, right? And so it's an interesting one, because often you can be like, oh, I'm a victim, but then maybe that's how we've learned to survive, or that's how, or even not, I was going to say worse, but worse in a way, that's how we've learned to get attention and validation from others, like a bit like pretending to our parents that we've been hurt so that they'll give us affection, because we've decided that we're not going to get it the other way around, which is by excelling. If we think we can't excel, then instead we're going to get that attention. Like, we both studied under William Whitecloud, and I think he pretty much says that, right? We're all seeking validation and love in one way or another. And so that's where, again, that's where things get overactive and can really keep us stuck. Because what keeps coming in my mind as we're talking is, yes, there's fear, and there is obviously a very natural part of fear, which is fine. It keeps us safe. We don't want to fall off a tall building. We don't want to get hurt. We don't want to get eaten. We don't want to drown, right? So fear does keep us safe up until a point, right? But then where does it keep us stuck? And part of that, what I'm thinking as you're talking as well is like, well, there's no getting away from it, right? Like growing up, there's no like perfect parenting. There's no perfect life, like childhood, where you're never going to get any kind of fear, right? Like you know, like this, you pulled the train apart, you were curious, you went to the shop, the guy's like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Now, he probably had a good reason, but just the way that he communicated it left an impression on you, right? So that's going to happen. That we can't control that. But then what's interesting as we get older, if we never explore, and this is where I think about things in terms of stories, if we never explore the story that we've created around these things, like the napkin, for example, then that story is going to play out. It's a loop, right? And we just go, oh, okay, this is a scenario. It looks similar to that thing that happened before. Oh, I know what happens here, and then that starts to rob us of the joy of being present. It robs us of actually discovering new things, new people, new conversations. You know, some of the best salespeople, they just keep asking, right? They never let the previous 1,000 no's prevent them from,
Yeah,
because they've learned somewhere that actually eventually they'll get another yes, right? That sort of thing. But for many people, just one no is enough to stop them from doing promoting themselves or asking for anything ever again. So yeah, the idea of story, and this again with Shookman is really really cool. Is it allows us to see what story, if we can separate him from ourselves, what stories does he live by, right? What's the
yeah,
underlying theme of his story, of that fear? Because then when you go out into the world and you can recognize it, like, so I know mine quite well, and it's like I don't have permission, right? So I'm not allowed to be capable in the sense that I have the ability, but I need to be given the authority, the permission, and I don't have that, right? Clearly a childhood decision. I'm
very
an adult.
familiar. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm an adult, right? So it's like, well, who's going to give me
yeah,
permission at this point? But then that leaks out in many different ways. It can be deferring my own authority by saying, "Oh, that person is the authority here, so they're going to tell me what to do, and I'm just going to just sit and wait." It can
yeah,
show up as not taking lead in times where it's applicable for me to take lead. That can be in relationships, but that can also be in management, in work, in business, but also just my own life. Right, going, what am I doing today? Right, and it's like if I feel like I don't have permission, my brain can go blank and I could be like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? So I think it's
yeah,
really interesting in the world where if you've not uncovered if you've never looked at it, there's that famous quote: if you've never looked at the unconscious, then you're going to call it. It's going to rule your life, and you're going to call it fate. And that's what that's
yeah.
about.
That's
It's
attributed to Carl Jung. That one, I think, is his name.
that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And it's a famous one, but that's what that's about. If you've never looked at
yeah.
it, then you're just going to be like, oh, that's just how it is for me. You know, like I'm not worthy of getting napkins to use that one, right? But it could
It's
be,
funny how well hidden
yeah,
it can be because that napkin story, because it's mine, I can relate to that a lot. But also
yes,
see a sense of identity tied up in that. This is why I like your
yeah,
Shookman thing, right? Because I can almost go back to being a child, being at a restaurant,
mm,
so when you haven't got the napkins, and then your mother's like, like, oh, I'm scared, I don't want to go get the napkin. Same with the permission thing. Like, am I allowed to be over there? No one's given me explicit
right,
permission to say, and I've been
yeah,
reprimanded before for being out of bounds or where I'm not supposed to be.
yeah,
So that fear comes on. So then you go to your mother, look, this is my experience. I don't know if this is real memory or not, but,
mm,
it's, I'm scared. I don't really do it. Well, you don't worry about it then. I'll go get them. Right. And that becomes the sense of, okay, well, I'm the even as a little kid, I'm the person that doesn't have enough
mm,
confidence to go and get the napkins.
yeah,
So then when you're an adult, you can almost play on that, becomes your identity. They
yeah,
go, hi, I'm Bevan. I don't like getting napkins. And you go out, imagine going out to a restaurant as an adult.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like, you got to go, oh, can you go get it for me? Right. Because you're
yeah,
playing out
yeah,
that identity of, I don't like getting it. But
yeah,
when you can take your idea of a shook man and go, no, that part of me
yeah,
over there, right? That's just that that I want to say record, but then we're talking putting Shookman into an identity as a that entity
yeah,
has that fear, but I'm over here and who gives a shit?
yeah.
It's
What's
kind of
yeah,
and then
what's
start
crazy is
practicing operating from this other position,
yeah,
detaching from that identity of fear.
what's crazy as well is that most people are operating from their quote unquote shook man. So then you've got the person who's fearful of going and asking for what they want, and they're going to go and ask someone else who's coming from a space like, so if we use that example of the guy that said, oh, you should never have pulled that motor out, right? So you've got the young kid who's
Yeah.
like, I'm not allowed to do things, and I've done something because you felt curious and you followed that instinct. And then you've got the guy who's like, it's maybe we can only assume because he's not here to tell us himself, but let's just assume he's got something around control, or because he's fearful of, maybe he electrocuted himself at some point, right? Or maybe he was told off for the same sort of thing. Okay, so now you've got two.
Yeah, who knows, right?
Yeah. So then,
Yeah.
but then you get and this happens all the time in
You got two
relationships.
Shookmen shooking each other.
Yeah. But it happens all the time in relationships, right? So like, and me and my wife have recognized this. Like, she has a thing of like, hers is like fear of rejection, and mine is more like fear of being overpowered. So I can be aloof, and then when I'm being aloof, she'll be like, "Oh, I think he's rejecting me." so then, and be like, if you're not aware of that, that happens a lot in relationships, right? Not just romantic relationships, any relationship, parent, child, friends, whatever. It happens all the time, and it's just the shook part, not rather than the, we focus a lot on the shook part, right? But there is obviously another side to us, and I'm sure we'll get to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, even coming up with Shookman, you've gone out there, you've built it into a brand, you've written a book, you've gone out there and you've done work, you've built it in front of teenagers and taught the stuff, which I think that's got to be one of the, like, talk about an audience you're going to be scared of.
Yeah.
But see, then I love the almost the meta, the self-referential lesson in that you've had to overcome Shookman in order to teach people about Shook. If there's one in the same, what's that journey been like for you? Like, just going from having this idea on paper, which you literally came out of acknowledging that you were scared. So here was this fear, and now you are putting this out there. I think that'd be terrifying, right? I've run seminars and stuff before, and I know even just putting it out, what are people going to think? That, to be honest with you, the idea of putting that to schools and going out in front of the stand in a class of particularly teenage boys, girls too, because they're horrible. That must be absolutely terrifying. And then you work through that. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I'm laughing again because I recognize what you're saying, and I think because I've been doing it for a little while, what helps is I'm very much grounded in the reality that we all have this. So when it's a truth. It's not even like it's like, it's as true as gravity. So when I talk about it, like, a word I like to use is resonance, right? And that's a feeling. It's like, so when I talk about something, it's my true experience, but it resonates. People feel it in themselves, and they go, yes, right. So when I'm delivering, yes, they might not agree or they may not feel comfortable with it, but on a subconscious level, or even a conscious level, they're going to know, yes, I feel this way. And actually, this is something that I found has been so instrumental in being able to talk to young people, is that, young people, they, if you go and you can pretend to be, whatever, right? They're going to smell it. They're going to see it. They're going to be like, oh no, this guy's lying, or he's not being authentic. But when I go and I talk, and I don't talk about it in a meek way. I say openly. I say, this is how it is. They can recognize, whether or not they're willing to admit it, they can recognize that this is the truth, that they have it. And actually, it's a huge part of my workshops when I go in, whether I'm delivering to adults or young people. One of the things that I tap into is that we all have this, right? And I really get people to share. I create a nice environment that I go first. I find that really helps. And that's just my natural way of talking. Like, without even intending to, I would have done that on, in this conversation, because that's how I communicate, right? I just communicate that way. But I've noticed by doing that, I have done it actively sometimes, and I notice whenever I go first, it creates an environment, a space where people feel like, oh, well, if he's talking that way, I can talk that way. If he's sharing this, then I feel safe to share this, and so I really create a space of no judgment. So I've had it where students are really just like, there's one class, and I walked into once, and everyone was just like completely like I don't know what the word is, like they non-responsive. They barely spoke. It was like going to a comedy club and just having it, having the audience fall flat right on your jokes,
Yeah.
that sort of thing, right? I've had that experience. Luckily for me, though, prior to that experience, I had actually had the opposite, where I had a complete bubbling and engaging group. So I walked into that group with loads of energy, and
Yeah.
and then I was able to ride that. But it's interesting because I think, or rather, I know just from my own experiences, like we remember what it is to be that age, and it's a tough age, right? I'm thinking more here, like the younger they are, let's say 8 to 12, I find they're far more open and engaged in this work because it's kind of like, oh, this is what we're doing, cool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You set the foundation. Oh yeah,
Untarnished.
cool. Yeah. Oh, okay. We're talking about emotions. Yeah, I have emotions. Okay, cool. Right. Whereas going towards 15, and then they've been in high school, they have been comparing to each other. They're a bit more guarded. Things become more guarded, and of course, there's a huge hormonal change and all sorts they're dealing with at that point, right? And how we appear and what we look like becomes way more important, and everything that was cool when you were young is now no longer cool, right? And you're redefining everything. So I find, can be a lot more guarded. Not everyone, but I would say a lot more of them. But then I'd say even by the time they reach 18, there's a lot more maturity and willingness to explore certain things and appreciation for it. So it just depends. But one thing I would add as well, which has really been an eye opener, is that one thing all humans share is emotions. So no matter what their background, what their experience, whatever the kind of trends are going on, I don't need to know that stuff. When I walk in, I start talking about feelings and how that impacts our actions and our goals. It's something that everyone can relate to, and I found that to be amazing because, like, I had no concept of talking to 10-year-olds before I started teaching them. But as soon as I started talking about emotions to them, we can communicate. The minute they start talking about their toys and whatever they play, I have no idea. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But the minute I bring it back to emotions, we're all on the same page. So, yeah, it's been quite a journey. But like I said, I think because I've been doing it for a while, it's allowed me to build that foundation of on like a foundation of knowing that, you know what, this is something that everyone experiences. So I ride in on that.
It's interesting you talk about after doing it for a while, you've built a foundation. One thing strikes me a lot is the analogy of going to the gym. Now, there's so much talk about mental health and stuff nowadays. And I feel like some people make excuses and they go, "Oh, I'll just go and feel better then, shall I?" And it's like, well, of course it's not that easy. It's like saying
Mm.
somebody who's massively overweight lying on the couch. So say you're absolutely terrified. You're a kid. You've been through these experiences. You've built up this big fear, and you've never practiced dealing with it. You haven't had anybody to coach you or train you. And if you want to be good at sport, you've got to go and train. You just don't go out and be the best in the world off the top of the bat. Everybody starts somewhere. So say you go to the gym and you start lifting weights. If you walk in there and you start lifting the heaviest weights, lucky if you're going to get them off the ground, but even if you did, you're probably going to hurt yourself. But if you start training just a little bit after a little bit, right? At first, I know I did CrossFit once, right? The first few times I did CrossFit and I came down, I was in pain for 3 days, couldn't move. But then after a while, right? And I think the same thing happens in life generally across, especially psychological overcoming fear. Because the first time you're going to be absolutely terrified because you've not trained that muscle, and you've just said this yourself as you've talked to kids. You've learnt, you've got used to it, you've changed your technique, you've built that
Hmm.
muscle, you practice, and now it comes
Mm.
seemingly effortlessly and not so scary. So I think there's something to be said for the training of it. Like there isn't a magic bullet. It's not like, hey, you're scared, go face it,
Mm. Yeah.
right? It's,
Yeah.
hey, you're scared, go. A few people talked about the starting with the tiny steps. Just start facing something small. Like you don't need to take on the biggest thing because you can't, right?
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
a
No,
mistake
true.
a lot of people make is just go, oh, I found this latest system and formula that's going to change everything, and they try it and they fall flat on their face and they go, oh, it doesn't work. Yeah, but that's exactly like trying to go to the gym and lift the heaviest weights right? It's not going to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Which leads
Yeah.
me into, you've got like a 6-step formula for it, though,
Mm,
right? So,
yeah. Yeah.
can I take you through that?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, in the over, oh, I don't know if you can hear, there's an
They're
ambulance going
coming
past.
at you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the steps of it are essentially is actually, you're gonna have to remind me because I haven't seen the
All right,
six
I've
steps.
got them
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So walking through it, you first just stop, right? So you've got stop, name it, listen, realize, connect, and make it visible.
Got
Is
it.
that
Yeah.
correct? If I got the right,
Yeah. No,
right? So
sure.
this is dealing with Shookman. First, stop,
Yeah.
name it, listen, realize, connect, and make it visible. So this is all in your book, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's where I
Yeah.
got that from.
No, you definitely did. Yeah. So yeah, the so to touch upon what you were saying as well is a huge part of human experience is actually about the journey, right? So often we get caught up in other people and what they're doing, and we think, oh, we want to get to that level, right? Whether it's like speaking in front of 100 people or 1,000 people, or having a podcast with whatever 1 million subscribers.
Anthony Robbins, yeah.
Right. And then it's kind of like, and then we get fixated on just the end result rather than the journey that actually it will take to get there. And I'm also reminded of something I know we both know very well, which is the hero's journey, right? That the archetype of or the structure of a general story. Every film we ever watch will begin with the hero in some kind of challenge or problem, some inferiority, not complex, but in some kind of weakness that they need to overcome. And then in doing it, they then become stronger, better, faster, right? And that's it. So, like, I know you're going through your journey with business and in with podcasting, and it's not smooth sailing, right? There's ups and downs, and we were talking a lot about earlier about how when you stop something and you start something and you forget and you have to redo it, and it's all part of the growth of being
Yeah.
and becoming that ideal version of yourself. So yeah, I totally agree. Like it's a journey, and so often I think what keeps us stuck sometimes is the idea that we're supposed to already be it without any fear. And actually no, it's like, again, thinking back to all of our little, or not even little, but childhood experiences and the fears that we learned along the way. Then now it's kind of that creates the film. That it's something I used to say to clients is, when you go to a film, most films don't start at the end. Most films start at the beginning where the
Yeah.
character is struggling, right? They don't finish. A film doesn't start with everything's done and it's like the end of
Yeah.
Independence Day and they're all celebrating. I mean, some films
Yeah,
do now, but
Alan Watts.
yeah. Go on.
Alan Watts talks the same thing about the purpose of a symphony isn't to get to the end as fast as you
Right.
possibly can.
Yeah.
Right? That's the journey is if the
Yeah.
point of a symphony was to play the notes as quickly as you damn well can and get it finished and move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Where's the
Yeah.
beauty in that? Right? That's
Yeah.
the
Yeah. And that's a life, right? That's a life lived, as opposed to like another quote I heard somewhere, and I don't know where it's from, but they said, like, certain people, that when they're so wealthy that they can have whatever they want, they're no longer happy because they can just literally manifest anything they want, and
yeah.
and there's no trial and tribulation, there's no struggle. They have to
I
manufacture
don't
struggle.
believe it. Come on.
but it like I can imagine it, like, yeah, just that sense of, it's like anything when you have an abundance of it, it's like it becomes less interesting, less
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, so to the 6 steps. So as you mentioned, stop, name it, listen to your fear, realize, connect, and make visible. So yeah, stop is a simple part of it, and stop goes back to this idea of, like, the napkin, right? We'll use that as an example. It's like, stop and check in and recognize, like, what are your thoughts and feelings, what is coming up, and that also goes into this idea of being able to observe your thoughts and feelings and going, actually, hang on, this isn't, I'm on automatic here. There's something I want to do, but there's something also stopping me, and I need to kind of just stop for a second and go, hang on, what is that? What's coming up? And thinking about those thoughts and feelings. And I wrote in a book that say to yourself, that's not me. These are just thoughts and ideas, right? That's like on page 18. And then name it. So I've called it Shookman. You can call it whatever you want, right? Acknowledging it, and also acknowledging that it's not unique to you, that everyone has this. So that's like two pieces of stellar advice in there. And there's a little story. I was in Mauritius, where my family's from, and the house where I was staying, there were these two reptiles. And at the time, I hadn't realized like reptiles were just commonplace in Mauritius, and they were large. They were like this size each, right? And every morning they'd be there. And eventually, I named them. I think I literally called them what's that? Rick and Morty. I call one Rick. I call one Morty, right? And I noticed what happened within a few days. I'd be coming down in the morning, and I'd just be saying, "Oh, good morning, Rick. Good morning, Morty," and by naming it, it took the fear away, and it personalized it, right? And it's a subtle psychological shift, but by naming a character, by naming it, it makes it more personable. It makes it easier to relate to. But also this idea, recognizing it's not an idea, the truth that we all have fears. Again, it makes us feel less isolated, because most people walk around thinking that they have it worse than others, and that for whatever reason their fear is debilitating, but other people have it easy, right? And that just makes it worse. It just makes it worse because it just feels like everyone else is luckier, and then we're hard. But actually, by talking to more people and by having these sort of conversations, I have learned categorically that everyone's got stuff, right? Everyone, right? So Elon Musk will have his fears. I mean, actually, if you haven't read about him and you read about him, you realize, yeah, his man's got some serious psychological issues that he talks about, anger issues and stuff. You can read about it. It's out there in the public.
Yeah.
Relationships he struggles with and all that sort of stuff, right? But anyone that you think has just got it together, and celebrities or whatever, royalty celebrities or successful business people, everyone. And if you dig deep enough, you'll see that actually they probably shared it themselves. Lewis Hamilton meditates before racing to calm his nerves, right?
Who's Lewis Hamilton?
Lewis Hamilton, a number one F1 racer.
Right.
Yeah. So Lewis Hamilton, I ended up reading his biography. It was interesting. But in terms of success, F1, I think, what is there, something like 10 or 11 spaces on a track. So every team has two drivers. So basically, you've got like 22 possible people at the top. And so it's a very small pool, like compared to, say, football, where you've got however many however many in a team, and you've got multiple teams, right? If you want to be top in the game in F1, there's 22 something places, and that's it, right? For you to be top. Lewis Hamilton held number one for so long. So if anyone knows about success and succeeding, it's like he's a great person to speak to, right? And like he talks about meditating before racing to calm his nerves, to calm his, and so here's a guy who's categorically, if you want to look at success, winning. Success is kind of variable, but winning in a competition, if you're king in that competition, your seat is very limited. So like everyone's coming for it. Yeah.
The funny thing I can relate to, I know sometimes success can be the scariest thing afterwards. There are some things I've done in my life that I've done really good out of the gate, and then got terrified that I'm gonna, because the failure after if you come out and you're really good at it, then if you come out and you shit at it the second go round, that's way more scary than just being shit at it in the first place, right?
Sure.
There's a few things I think even some of my first YouTube videos I made, I think are my best, right? I've made over 100 of them since, and it's the first ones. I'm like, but I had to get over that, after being willing to make bad content, sort of just just go and who cares? Just go and make shit content, get it all out of your system, right? But that's you see someone who's number one, what do they call that? The sword of Damocles, right?
Yeah.
That's the same thing. That success can come with its own fear, right? The fear's not going to go away just because you succeed. It might get worse, right? That's
Or you get and also you get people that are like one-hit wonders, right? Because of similar sort of thing, they'll go and they'll do it. There was someone who was saying, I forget which artist it is now, but they were looking at they were a successful artist, and they were looking at like maybe Ed Sheeran going, but he's even better because he's been able to reproduce that again and again and again. Whereas they came out, made a few, and then they struggled to get back on it. I hear Justin Bieber's in that sort of space right now. He's like in a space of like he's very doesn't want to create because it's just like he doesn't feel like he can create something worthy.
Like you did before, yeah.
Yeah. So we had stop, we had name it, and then we got listen to your fear. Like listen to it in a sense of like what's the pattern? How does it compel you to act? Like, and there's three key ways that fear can make us act. It can make us freeze, it can make us run, or it can make us fight. So fight, flight, or freeze, right? So so some people are compelled to just run at something, and try to overcome it, but from a space of fear. Some people freeze, and some people run. I think I'm more like the freeze. You're kind of like, oh, I'll just wait until some other unknown time for me to take action, right?
Yep.
So then the next step 4 is
go to sleep. It'll be fine. Go to sleep.
And exactly right. And so number 4 is realize if you keep listening to that and keep doing the same thing, you're never going to reach your potential. You're never going to do the things you want to do, right? And like your YouTube videos is a great example. It's like if you always went, whoa, this is not good enough, you would never improve. You would never actually get to where you got to today, right? And just keeping on building. So 5 is getting into it is like connecting with the joy of something, right? And I alluded to this slightly earlier, right, about the ego. The ego has positives as well. It's like things that we enjoy, but then there's something more than that. And I've realized recently that joy as an emotion is akin to love. It's one of the highest kind of energetic feelings we can have. But more specifically, when we're in joy, we're in that state of being where we don't actually, people talk about losing track of time. You're doing something you enjoy and you just completely lose track of time, right? It doesn't matter if it's 10 minutes, it doesn't matter if it's an hour, 2 hours, a whole day. You're in it and you're loving it and you're creating because you enjoy it. And I think that is the highest expression of humanness, is to be there, is to be in that space of beingness, because no matter what you're doing, if you're in your state of being, you're living, you're in the journey, you're not worried about how it's going to look, you're not held back by past fears, you're just like, I'm enjoying this and I'm doing this, right? And it could be for a noble cause, or it could be something like, creating a podcast, it could be doing a charity, it could be starting a business, it could even be cleaning a house. But it's just like you're in that space of like, I'm doing this, I'm enjoying it, I'm present to it. The final thing is make it visible. And number 6 is making it visible. By making something visible, it makes it easier to contend with. So like I literally made fear visible, and that's the concept.
So you're holding up a little what's a
Shookman.
3D model of your Shookman?
Yeah, Shookman.
Yeah, cool.
He's seen better days. His arm's slightly broken now. I need to make a new one. But this is the first one I ever made. Actually, I made a few since then. But making it visible, it takes it out of this invisible space which is in the mind, and it puts it out in front of us that we can actually see it, right? So how might you make it visible? You might draw it, you might paint it, you might make a model like I've done. Talking about it, not necessarily visible, but like it brings it into reality. It's something that, even like right now, we've both shared very openly about our own fears and things, and it's made it less of an issue because we're just like, well, hey, this is what we're doing, right? So so those just for the audience, because I know we kind of jumped around on it. We'll just go. So I went through stop, name it, listen to your fear, realize if you keep following what it's telling you, you're going to get stuck. Connect with something higher, connect with your joy, connect with the thing that you love doing, and also make things visible so that you can see it, right? And that's a big part of what Shookman's about, is actually putting it into the world in a way that we can engage with it. Young people can engage with it, adults can engage with it. The most recent example of that is I created the first ever Shookman cartoon, right? And that's something that I want to get more into, is making animations around this, because again, I'm making it visible.
Yeah. That's cool. See, create something out of it too, right? Because that's what I'm noticing on you. You're not just making it visible. It might be a flow-on effect from after that, but now you've made it visible. Now that it's real, it's got something it can create into something positive, right? I think that's basically your entire Shookman business and career and brand has come out of the fact that you wanted to sit down and acknowledge your fear. You noticed it. you understood what it was, you took it down, you sat down, you drew it, and then it's just progressed from there until now. You're talking about creating a cartoon that's got Shookman in
Yeah.
it. Like this is talk about alchemy, right? Taking the
Yeah.
transformation of literally transforming fear into a creative work, a
Totally.
body of work. That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, and I think like there's a really key lesson in that, and I called it pain to purpose. It's that our experiences in life aren't meant to hold us back. They're meant to give us something to work with, right? It doesn't mean everyone has to go out and create a business around their fears, but it could be anything, right? But there isn't any art that is created without the sense of pain behind it, like the sense of like all these great songs that we hear, or even paintings and things. Like there is that amalgamation of our pains and our experiences that we then go, right, this is how I'm feeling. And so being able to express that, and it goes right back to what you asked me at the beginning. Isn't it cool that I had a friend that we could share openly with? And what I'm doing
Yeah,
is I'm taking that experience and I'm making it available to the world. It's like we can all
yeah,
share openly and create things. Yeah.
great. So brings us close to the end. This has been really good. Where can people go and find out more? Download the book we were talking about. Find out more about what you do. See what Shookman looks like. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So two places. The first place I would say go to the website, www.shookman, that's SHOOKMAN.com. So yeah,
Yep.
there's a website there. And then the other place I'd say would be Instagram is where I post most frequently. And that's at Shook, SHOOK .MAN, and that's on
All
Instagram. So
right.
those are the top two places. But the book is available on the
Go and
website. Yeah. Yeah.
go and connect with Ahmad on Instagram.
Yeah. And
You need to
actually,
post more.
yeah. And actually, there's also I've recently created a questionnaire for parents who want to measure how emotionally resilient their kids are. It's for any parents of young people aged 8 to 18, and you'll get a report that will tell you like how resilient your child is. So you can go ahead, you can find that
All
on the
right.
website as
Yeah.
well.
I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that kind of want to, because a lot of this stuff we don't really get taught at school. It's things you and I have gone personal development
Yeah.
courses and come across this stuff. I think there's a lot of parents in that same boat who have taught these things and gone, how do I teach my kids? You're
Yeah.
feeling that gap. Go and check out Shookman, find out
Yeah.
more.
Cool.
Sweet. Thanks. Had a real good chat. We'll wrap it up there.
Cool,
And
man. Appreciate
been
it.
really good
Thanks so
talking to
much.
you. Thanks, man.